Okay, so week 3 is done. Week 4 is ahead of us, and week 3 is a big day in this class. I had talked about this last time, and it's true. But it seems like most of you, now a few of you had some challenges, and that's what happens. Honestly, and I can't predict when it will happen, but it is fairly under. I don't want to say common because there is no common in this case. Your individual computers all have a unique ecosystem. And I don't mean the ecosystem in the traditional way that we talk about ecosystems. Ecosystems are often related to if you're a Mac person, you have a Mac laptop, you have an iPhone, you're in that ecosystem, right? On the Android side, we don't have an equivalent of that. But what I mean when I say ecosystem is what you install on your computer, okay? Because each of us install different software. And what that does is you can have then a varying level. You then take that and you put, okay, install VS Code, install Git, clone that repo into your local system, and then have whatever changes you're making, tracking that through Git workflow, those commands, right? Git status, git add, git commit, git push, it can take a moment to wrap your head around it. So, but I'll tell you that if you give it the time that you need, or if you reach out for help when you need it. Now, at this point, if you're still uploading, it's going to hurt you. So, and I've seen a couple of you this week, and that's great because you need to get the week 3, especially those Monday night items complete, because that everything else we do in this class depends on it, especially when we get to the last project, the project 0 for this class, because you're going to have a template. So let's just kind of review a little bit before I jump there, because it all goes in line. So this week, after you got that local environment, you did your first section of Learn HTML and CSS. And I have looked at a lot of different videos for this topic, and I can't say this is the best produced, but the content is awesome. I really appreciate his delivery here. Again, keep in mind, if you're hopefully the next step, and you might be actually already enrolled in CIT85, which is the HTML and CSS. So that whole class focuses on those topics. You just get a taste of it here. What we're doing is we're giving you some HTML and CSS. And then quickly, now by the way, quickly means we get through next week, we do 2 more parts, okay? So we do part 3 and part 4, and all that is just continuing to do more code. I term this, if you take some of my coding classes, code along. And B, make sure you're looking at my requirements as far as commit messages, right? So those I ask for specific locations in the video, time mark wise, and then messages. Okay, so the reason I was kind of going through this litany is after we finish this, starting into week 5, then we learn Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a framework that allows us to build sites on a little abstracted. You'll hear this term a lot when you're around developers and coders. When you abstract something, what you're doing is you're kind of seeing it from a higher level, which means what you're doing, it may not appear this way when you learn Bootstrap, but in order to do something equivalent, like we're using Bootstrap to, let's say, create a header. And there are certain graphical pieces in a UI, user interface pieces that we can create with Bootstrap that would take a bit more effort with HTML. So the reason Bootstrap is so freaking popular is that it's easier to create something that looks more polished without necessarily all the time. And those tools are good. You'll learn eventually, and Todd focuses more on just using the base HTML and CSS, which I think is a good way to go, but I also think it's good to learn the HTML path, or sorry, the Bootstrap path. So just giving you a little preview about where we're heading hereafter, because ultimately what you'll do then is we take learning Bootstrap and then we say, okay, go find a template out on the web. So not only are you using a system like Bootstrap that abstracts a little higher some of that lower HTML stuff, CSS coding, but now we're going to actually use a template created by somebody else. Now, why do I do this? I do this because this is really sometimes how development goes. And it is good to have this experience, right? So in addition to learning this layered approach, this abstracted approach, you're also learning how to work in a local environment. And these are all skills you can take to the next level. That's my hope. Okay, so looking at this week, like I said, I appreciated, there was some interesting discussion about the Microsoft GitHub purchase. And yes, it's been a couple of years, and some of the fears that developers had about GitHub being purchased by Microsoft were not necessarily, they didn't come into reality. There were a few things that flared up that was like, what are you guys doing here? But for the most part, it did give GitHub, right? So here's the deal. GitHub is an open source platform. And part of the reason this was interesting is Microsoft traditionally has not been open source. Now, if you know the term open source, it's the idea that we're creating software that's licensed in such a way that anyone can look at the source code and then you can do attribution in order to modify the source code. But the idea is Microsoft, because they're commercial software, hasn't really been interested in doing some of this. So it was interesting to see, and a couple of you did, you took it from the original purchase and you brought it up to date. A couple of you did, and that was great, because that's really what you want to think about. It's like, you know, initially there was an idea about it, and then now what is that? So it was good. I enjoyed reading your work this week. Many of you found some good commands on the command line to learn. I'm telling you, the more you learn about the command line, it will benefit you generally anywhere you go, especially if computers is your focus, which for most of you is true. So as we move into week 4, as I already said, you're going to continue on based on my delineation, meaning how much of the HTML and CSS I want you to consume. And then one of the things that's really good is we're using, you know, VS Code for the most part. Is there anybody, I can't remember if anybody told me they weren't using VS Code. I think most of us are. It's become a standard. By the way, VS Code, right? Open sourced from Microsoft. So I think Microsoft has really gotten on board with some of the new ways of thinking. Anyway, we're just grateful to Microsoft for such a great product. And what happens is there's so much in that editor that, like, same is true with Word, same is true with any application. The more you use something, right, the more you learn different techniques and tools to be effective. So in this week, I want you to kind of venture out and think about ways you can become more productive in doing that. And then, of course, covering the all classic understanding UTF-8, the file encoding format. This is, I always tends to be a really good discussion around that. You're going to get back to your GitHub pages and do some work in there. And then we end with what I consider the classic, and this is a couple of years old. There's actually an anthology just about this video and how it went viral before, you know, it was one of the early viral moments, and studying how these things happen. But more importantly for us in the web, we have to think about how far we've come, that the machine is using us. Anyway, it's a classic. So the thing I'd like to leave you with, or I'd like you to comment on this week, right? Just remembering, I'm not seeing, I only see a couple of you. I'd love to see more of you in my office hours. And I'm never sure, like, is the reason you're not coming, is it the time, or is it that you don't need help, right? So in your reply, what I'd like to see is, A, do you know how to find my office hours? Okay, so you can put that in your reply. B, do you not have a need to come, or do my times not work for you? Because I'm always attempting to try to figure out how I can meet students where they're at, because I know that, again, I've said this 10 times, so I'm going to repeat myself. The time you work and the time I work are probably not the same. So, but how can I be flexible right? And how maybe can you be flexible if you need help? And so my hope is that if I'm not seeing you, you don't need help. I hope you, it's not that I hope you don't need help. It's that I hope you're getting through it and not in need of help, just to be clear. Anyway, week 4, check this out. So we are really at that place where we're approaching during this week, because it's a 9-week class. So halfway through next week, we're halfway through. And this class goes really quickly, right? So I want, just keep that in mind. So if you're submitting late work, yes, I take it, it's discounted 25%. But the important thing is to get it done, right? Because if you get a week or a week and a half or 2 weeks behind, it's a real challenge to catch up. You see the pace of the work in this class, hopefully, and it seems like most of you are pacing well. So what do I want you to reply with? Well, what I look for, and I'll say it again in your reply, is did you watch the video? Did you answer some of the questions I posed? Or was there something else that caught your attention? All right. Peace out. Have a great one. Bye.